Joining us now live from Michigan, he's a professor at the Catherine University, Ezekiel Gebisa. Professor, thank you so much for joining us.
For having me.
Sir, we've been witnessing the tragic situation right now that is taking place in Ethiopia. What is the latest that you can tell us about what is happening there right now?
It looks like the opponents that have laid siege to the capital are within about 100 kilometers from all sides. It's the Tigrayan Defense Forces from the north and the Oromo Liberation Army from the west and northwest. It looks like that they're going to probably move into Addis Ababa any time because the balance of forces is now tilting in favor of the opponents.
But it seems like neither side, neither the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front nor ABM, seem to heed the call to create some kind of compromise. Do you think like there's any chance of the situation probably simmering down, or do you think it's going to get much worse from here on?
It all depends on the Ethiopian government side. From the Tigray government side, they have already put conditions from the beginning of the war, 8 conditions. If those conditions were met, that they would stop the war. But in all honesty, the Ethiopian government has deployed denying food as a weapon, using humanitarian assistance, completely putting the Tigray province under siege, and did not heed any call from the international community to complete and end this war through negotiated settlement. It didn't seem that way, but yesterday the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia had put out 3 conditions. That it looks like because the military solution is not looking like it's working for Ethiopia, they are really inching towards a negotiated settlement. But I think that the conditions look like they are so far apart that the negotiated settlement is probably not likely.
You spoke about conditions put forward by the government and conditions put forward by the TPLF. If I may, could I ask you to elaborate a little more on those conditions that the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front has put forward?
Yeah, the Tigray government, the Tigray regional government, which is now the elected government in Tigray, they have said that their goal in this war is to end the genocide against them, to end the siege that is put on the Tigray province, to allow access, humanitarian access, unencumbered by anything into Tigray. And their goal is simply to break the siege, to break out of the encirclement. That's their military goal. The political issues, how you settle politics, is something that should be taken up at a later date. On the Ethiopian government side, the conditions are that the Tigrayan government forces, the TDF, the Tigray Defense Forces, withdraw from Amhara and Afar regions. But the Tigrayans are saying that simply means that they will not have this depth of that they would use as a protection against another onslaught from the Ethiopian side. So this will stop, where they could meet halfway, is really not clear to me. That it is going to have to be that one side wins the war, and the war is going to end that way. For now, that is very difficult. It's very difficult to see that the positions could be bridged and a negotiated settlement ends this conflict.
So one thing, Abiy's government seems to be sweeping the city for everyone, even remotely linked to the Tigrayan group. Do you think this could backfire and cause more problems for him going forward?
I think so. It's not. Yeah, this is really a disaster from the perspective of humanitarian human rights. That all Tigrayans, to be honest, all Tigrayans, businesses, teachers, day workers, simply because they are Tigrayans, they are rounded up and taken to unknown locations. The government is saying that they're suspected. If they are suspected of anything, they should be brought to trial or to the court and be arraigned for what they have done. But right now, it's just about everybody that walks that has an ID card that is designated as Tigrayan. It's not only Tigrayan, by the way. It's also the Oromo who are suspected of supporting the Oromo Liberation Army. So these are the two opponents that have their eyes on the capital, and the government had declared a state of emergency, basically to circumvent the constitution and round up any suspected, any Tigrayan or any Oromo that seems to be supporting these two groups. So it is basically the state of emergency that they had declared that indicated early on that the government was really heeding the calls of politicians in the country and activists who were calling for the rounding up of Tigrayans to build a concentration camp. That is the same that the United States used in World War II. So that's what they're using as a military strategy right now.
Yeah, I'd like to know how is this being permitted, and how is this possible under the auspices of the Geneva Convention? Doesn't this tantamount to ethnic cleansing and perhaps genocide if you're rounding up an entire race or ethnicity of people? How is this being allowed by the international community right now? Shouldn't this amount to genocide and ethnic cleansing?
I think the international community is playing both sides. That is, on the one hand, they don't want the Ethiopian government to fall and to deal with the consequences of a collapse of authority in Addis. So they want to keep the government in place. But violations of human rights, crimes against humanity, and all kinds of atrocity crimes known to man have already been perpetrated against Tigray already. This is simply the latest in the latest iteration in many crimes of war crimes, atrocity crimes, crimes against humanity, using food as a weapon. All of this have been committed, and the international community is not doing anything. They're playing this both sidism, saying that everybody is doing it. It is, of course, a violation. It is, of course, an abject violation. It is true, but I don't think the international community is equipped to deal with this situation at this moment in time, because on the one hand, they want to prevent the collapse of authority in Addis so that they don't deal with the consequences of a fall of authority. On the other hand, they don't want to deal with this idea of never again. But genocide has been committed in Tigray and in Oromia. It's already happened. It's not something that the rounding up of opponents and putting them in concentration camp is simply the latest iteration, and it's really the milder form of violation of human rights.
Indeed. Professor, one last question. When the dust settles, will the Amhara and Eritrea soldiers who have committed war crimes, will they ever be held accountable, do you think?
It depends on how the outcome of this war. If the opponents win the war, and of course they have support for political reasons, if they win the war, then all of these people that have committed the crimes that we just listed might be brought to justice within Ethiopia. Maybe a special tribunal would be established, but that transitional justice is going to be necessary in order to heal the wounds. If it is an international crime, then Ethiopia is not a signatory to the Rome Statutes, but some kind of arrangement must be made, and Ethiopia should sign the Rome Statutes, and then those that perpetrated, the Eritreans that perpetrated human rights violations and genocide and ethnic cleansing within Tigray, within Ethiopia, should be handed over to the ICC. But it all depends on how this conflict itself concludes.